steps like that help zoos to be directly impactful on those projects that we think so far out of reach, but really we are involved. Obviously, we're not the rock stars of it. There are others in the field that are getting dirty, and they're the ones. But
the bottom line is,
it's a team.
Without us and without other zoos, organizations wouldn't be successful. And then without those organizations, we would not be successful. And the same with the zoo. I mean, if we didn't have zookeepers there, the zoo would fail. If we didn't have the concession staff there and the guest services staff there, the zoo would fail. And most importantly, if we didn't have the guests coming in, the zoo would fail. So it's all a collaborative, thing that we all need to balance and weigh and, trial and error. And this is working. Let's keep doing it.
This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Tidal Influence, a Californian ecological consulting firm who proudly supports environmental education and all of the diverse conservation efforts that Pelecanus works to highlight. Visit their website at tidalinfluence.com to learn more about what they do to conserve our coastal resources and how you can get involved. Hello everyone and welcome to Pelecanus. Pelecanus is a nonprofit organization focused on sharing the movement that is and has been happening in the conservation field. Now, this is Conservation Conversations, our long-form documentary-style show that highlights the people and organizations that are making it their purpose to grow the conservation field and to show that people have, and still are, making monumental differences in our world with intentional change. Head over to pelecanus.org to find all of our episodes and more. In this episode, we talked to a couple zookeepers from Greenville Zoo in South Carolina. Jennifer and Greg Garcia, a married couple, both have a passion for wildlife and conservation and have been dedicated to the cause for over a decade. Among the multitude of conservation projects they are involved in, we focus on the efforts to conserve Amur leopards, both in the wild and in zoos, as well as the larger scale efforts that the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or AZA, is undertaking. Now let's let them show us what a small zoo can do to save endangered species.
I don't really know too much about the small zoos. I think, trying to think of the zoos I've been to, it's the San Diego Zoo, and it's hard to envision a small zoo and that, because like when I would go to the San Diego Zoo, it feels like this giant entity that everyone has a role, and exactly like you guys said, it's very regimented. But first, I guess since we're kind of on that thread, can you guys kind of talk about zoos, maybe start with zoos in general, but how a smaller zoo like Greenville Zoo, what is their reach? How can they impact the field of conservation?
The USDA registers over 3,000 animal exhibitors in the nation, and they do inspect these institutions yearly for a baseline care, but there was no governing body of zoos, nothing to hold them accountable. So I want to say 1980.
I think it was in the 80s.
I'd have to double check when the Association of Zoos and Aquariums was formed, but it's the accrediting body, the most prestigious in the United States and maybe even the world. There are now 240 institutions accredited by the AZA, and what's nice, and I always have to say, just because a zoo is not accredited does not mean it's a bad zoo.
Very true.
However, if a zoo is accredited, you could be assured that they are doing their best to be better.
AZA standards every year, they just increase tenfold.
And if you ask anybody who works at a zoo whether or not they think animals should be in captivity, I hope they say no.
The majority of the keepers, are going to say no.
Yeah, so we do what we do because we don't want animals to be in cages, but we want to inspire the next generation of policymakers and policy supporters. We want them to be environmentally literate and conservation conscientious. So the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, they have to go through a 5-year cycle. They look at animal welfare, they look at veterinarian services, they look at the professional development for the staff, they look
eat
at
the concession stands, they drink out of the concession stand, they use the public restrooms.
and they look at our conservation programs. So even though we're a small zoo, we still have a pretty big impact. And what's nice is that 13 acres in South Carolina is still striving to meet the same outcome as San Diego Zoo that takes multiple days to really soak up. Yeah. And that's a great facility. And I'm confident to say that all AZA accredited zoos strive for that because we have something holding us accountable.
So you think San Diego, you think of Cincinnati, you think of, Chicago, Lincoln Park. But, like the smaller zoos kind of get sidelined because like, oh, it's just a small zoo. They're not really doing much, which that's where AZA comes in. That's why I mentioned is because AZA requires the zoo, the facility, to actually, a portion of the profits they make goes towards conservation. And especially if you have certain types of animals, back when we had elephants, we were required, not, besides having the elephants and all the standards that came with the elephants, we were required to donate a certain percentage of money to elephant conservation just because we housed elephants. And that's one of AZA's rules and policies.
So when we look at the conservation efforts of the Greenville Zoo, we have a conservation committee where it represents individuals from each department or division of our zoo: education, public service, even our events, maintenance, animal staff, and administration. Yeah. So, and we even invite community members that express concern, and those they're open for that. Now we do a lot of different stuff that's oftentimes behind the scenes and people don't know about. They just think that the exhibits are what's there and we're there to take care of the animals, and yes, we are, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So much of what we do happens behind that gate that you can't go.
And when you actually unpack what an organization that is 13 acres and 33 employees is actually doing for conservation, it's pretty insane. You've brought species back from extinction. You've discovered new species, as being part of a larger group. And that's awesome to think that you guys have that much of a reach. So I guess to kind of take a step back to kind of focus on, since we've already kind of talked about the program, the Amur leopards, if I'm saying it right, Amur. So as you kind of mentioned, you're a part of the AZA organization for Amur leopard conservation, and that organization, of all the zoos that are involved, has now taken that wild population from 35 to 100. Can you dive deeper a little bit into how does that, what are the mechanisms of that? Like, how does that happen? How do you actually triple a wild population?
The group that was known as ALTA, the Amur Leopard and Tiger Alliance. So Amur leopards and Amur tigers, some call them Amur leopards, tomato.
Siberian leopard, Siberian tiger.
Previously were known under the name of Siberian leopards and Siberian tigers. So if you hear those two, they're the same. Cat. So the group ALTA, they recently changed their name to Wildcat Alliance, I think is the name. And they're the ones in the Amur River Valley. They're the ones in negotiating the governments and even the national governments to get policy change for the people that live in that area, to protect the land that they have in there, because they have huge home ranges. So that team of researchers and advocates are on the ground. They've asked us to help them with the genetics of it, because they have some European zoos since they're closer, they're the ones of those facilities can reintroduce the actual cubs, and ALTA Wildcat Alliance, they work closely with them on the steps, the facility they use to teach them how to hunt, and then it's a transitional facility that gives them more and more freedom as they get older, and eventually, hopefully, they don't come back, but they have trackers on them. And then zoos in stateside, in our homeland, we use the SSP primarily to help those efforts, in that we provide a genetically diverse population that that they can pull from, essentially. So we just had leopard cubs at the zoo in February. Those leopard cubs will not go to the wild. They will have to maintain a healthy population. There are about 200 leopards in the United States, 200 Amur leopards within Association of Zoos and Aquarium Facilities in the United States. Their genetics are closely monitored and paired. The male that sired the cubs that we have, he was actually flown here from Germany because of his DNA that matched. There was quite a significant dilution of male DNA in the United States prior to him coming over, because there was very few males and they all had lots of offspring. So they provided a high risk for inbreeding and other mutations. So he successfully breeded with our female, and they have the cubs. He is now living at Philadelphia because he would think the cubs were delicious. So he is living in Philadelphia while mom raises those cubs because they're solitary. They don't see each other as family units, so that's pretty natural. So his DNA is helping to that genetic line. But zoos in the United States can also send, eggs from a female and genetic male over to those facilities that are operating in the field, and they can sedate a wild female. They can implant her with that embryo, and she can be a surrogate to those little cubs. So when those cubs are born, there's a whole new set of DNA that can revive a saturated pool in the wild.
Diving deeper into what Alta does. I mean, the hardest part of conservation effort, especially when it involves a community, is convincing the community or that government to want to save the animals. I mean, coming from a government standpoint, it's like that's why there's no point. Let them do whatever they want to do. They go extinct, but affect long-term, ecosystems, and they play a vital role in that ecosystem. And just convincing the community, the government to save these cats. It's a good thing. Trust us. I think that's the hardest part of. Honestly, I have no idea how you would go about doing that. I've never been exposed to that. That's a very difficult task to do. But once you get that, the next hard part is okay, who do we staff? Who do we hire to help enforce these laws now?
Could you put living room outside?
Yeah, walking around in camo and unhooking snares. And one of the biggest things about Amur leopards, why they're so endangered, is not because of deforestation. It's because of hunting for their pelts. They've got magnificent furs, and also the livestock. There's a lot of farmland up there, and these cats, easy prey. There's a goat, a sheep, bam, easy. And these hunters, kill them because it's affecting their life. I don't blame them for trying to make a living, and you got something that's interfering with that. They're trying to feed their kids, they're trying to feed their family. At that point, it was convincing the government to be like, hey, let us help pay for that missing, or let us replace cattle. What do you prefer? And putting out forest fires, doing the snares, training park rangers, just patrolling.
They have to convince somebody to protect something that's hurting them.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That evokes the behavior chain models that we learn so much about in school. But what's crazy is that they've been successful, and that they've been able to triple a population within a decade. Steps like that help zoos to be directly impactful on those projects that we think so far out of reach, but really we are involved. Obviously, we're not the rock stars of it. There are others in the field that are getting dirty, and they're the ones. But
the bottom line is,
it's a team.
Without us and without other zoos, organizations wouldn't be successful. And then without those organizations, we would not be successful. And the same with the zoo. If we didn't have zookeepers there, the zoo would fail. If we didn't have the concession staff there and the guest services staff there, the zoo would fail. And most importantly, if we didn't have the guests coming in, the zoo would fail. So it's all a collaborative, thing that we all need to balance and weigh, and trial and error. And this is working. Let's keep doing it.
When it comes to zoos, they can, as you kind of mentioned earlier, they can be pretty controversial. Some people don't like them, but as you kind of mentioned, they don't quite understand what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm kind of circled something you said earlier when it said you like no one wants animals in cages. So I guess, yeah, what kind of things would you like people to know about zoos and how you see zoos?
Tough subject. I do feel that, repeating what earlier, is that the majority of people that work in zoos would love to be put out of business, but only there's no need for zoos anymore, because what zoos do is ambassador animals for their wild counterparts to instill passion, experience captivity, so they want to preserve them in the wild. And if that mission is ever accomplished, then there's no need for a zoo anymore, because all the animals out in the wild, it's fine. They're not endangered. There's no animal that's endangered. There's, it's regulated. There's all sorts of different things going on. It's fine. No more zoos. Like, okay, cool. I appreciate that. Awesome. But as far as the one thing I would want, or a couple of things I'd want people to know, open-minded. A lot of people come into a zoo and just assume one thing, and they hone in on that one thing, and they, blow everything out of proportion. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. This is America. So before anyone ever, questions what a zoo does, ask questions. If you feel the need to be negative towards something, back it up, research, and ask questions. That's the best way.
I would add to saying the reason why the only way zoos can accomplish their goal is not only that animals are out in the wild and that living, but also that people have an equitable access to them to explore and enjoy. Will that ever happen? I don't think so.
We don't know.
That would be really great if everybody had the same opportunities to go on adventures to new places and see new things and live in that moment. But that is something that zoos do provide, even if it's a very common animal, like a
squirrel.
Or squirrels. Oh my gosh. The squirrels at the zoo are probably one of the most popular animals for our youngest.
Yeah, there's young kids, little guys are coming through here. Like there's the rarest cat in the world staring at them. Yeah. And there's a gray squirrel that runs by, and they're obsessed with the gray squirrel. They just chase this gray squirrel. And I'm like, whatever. They're enjoying the zoo, and that's all that matters. And if they can make good memories at the zoo, appreciate the zoo.
So I would say that you were mentioning, if you question zoos, if you are skeptical of them, ask those questions. Ask, how do you meet their needs? The zoos that meet their needs will tell you. The institutions that might have a lot of room for growth might be hesitant to show you. And what I'm really pleased with ours, we offer behind the scenes tours. We offer a live camera into some of our, watch them at any time. And
we try to be as transparent as possible.
And that's something that AZA accredited zoos really for. When an animal passes away, they tell you why, and
those animals at the zoo are probably cared for way better than I am. Zookeepers are there all the time. Like that's I was talking to someone today about this, is people don't really, like my mom still says, hey, you coming home for Christmas? I'm like, nope, I got to work. It's just like, zoo's closed. I'm like, there's still animals there. They still have to eat. It's not a job. It is a lifestyle, and it's a passion. And it's something that you eat, sleep, and breathe is the welfare for these animals and the mission of your facility.
When I talk to children about birds, and they say, I want to be a zookeeper, because zookeepers they're the rock stars of our zoo. People go, oh, zookeeper, I wonder if he's going to feed something. But when I talk to kiddos about getting into the zoo field, I tell them, when you wake up on Christmas morning, and if your family's Christmas, what's the first thing you do? You run downstairs, you're really excited, and zookeeper wakes up on Christmas morning, they put on their
Uniform on.
They go to the zoo, and when it's snowy and they get to stay home from school in a snow day, we walk to work because we can't drive. So we walk there to make sure if we're afraid that there's going to be a storm overnight,
Sleep over.
we spend the night there to make sure the animals aren't stranded away from care. If there's a flood, we stay there. It's much more than a job.
There is going to be always going to be a select few people that aren't going to get paid, that are going to continue doing what they're doing because it's what's in their heart, it's what they believe.
Given your combined over 2 decades of experience in accredited zoos, it's such a passion-driven organization, field, career choice for you. What is it that keeps you going? Because I can't imagine it's easy. Like you said, this morning when it's snowing, you're walking to work. It's, what is it about it that keeps that passion alive? What is it that gives you the hope, I guess, to keep going?
So when I first started, it was, wow, I'm standing next to this giraffe. This is awesome. Wow, I'm this tiger, this lion. I'm catching these vultures. For a couple of years, this is great. But after a while, just like everything, it gets repetitive. It gets the same old thing over and over again. But what keeps me going is when we do those behind the scenes tours, when we were able to get visitors close, especially close to these animals, and you see their reaction to it. It reminds you of how you felt, or how I felt, and that is what keeps me going. Is being able to share that experience that I remember having with other people, and seeing their faces light up, and having Anton, our anteater, stick his 24-inch long tongue out and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm like, I see it every day, but it is cool. You're right. They remind me of how awesome my job is, and how unique and different, and how honored and special to be a zookeeper.
It is funny to think how I catch myself bored.
Yeah.
and then you have these moments that are just rejuvenating, and people that keep us going. It's our community. It's when kids send us cards. They draw their favorite animal.
This is my last question, and it's maybe the hardest one. But, take your time. What is your favorite animal?
At the zoo? I don't know. I mean, I love the orangutans. I love our baby Adira. She's super cute. My phone is just full of pictures of her. A lot of people are like, here's my kids. I'm like, here's mine. I got 200 of them. But it's a tough one. I mean, I don't like picking favorites, but...
I get a lot of enjoyment out of frogs. They make me giggle a lot. And I do frog watch. I do monitoring of frogs at night, and something about out in parks, and I get special permission to be in parks, at night. And it's magical. There's fireflies, there's the noises, this symphony of others, and it's beautiful. And I'm the only one, out, and they're in the park at that time, and it's just really, I get a lot of enjoyment out of the frogs, and they make the funniest noises that are like fart noises.
What is the noise? What is the? Hey, baby.
So when I'm working, if I have people, I have them hold their nose, and you have to go, hey baby, hey baby, hey baby. And if a lot of people do it, it sounds like green tree frogs.
It really does. It really does.
Really funny. And then I also, I first worked with bears in Texas, and I really, really enjoyed the bears. They were black bears, and they were like from a storybook. They were super lazy, and just, they were like bears from a storybook, and I really like them. But I also, I don't know, Caterpillars are also one of my favorites. I know that's weird, but they look like dogs when you look up close at the caterpillars. I do enjoy snakes a lot.
Like bats eating bananas.
Oh my gosh, bat.
I don't know if you guys ever seen those videos.
If you've ever seen a bat wrapped in a towel eating a banana.
You don't know what you're missing.
I think I've seen that.
And watch it. They're so darn cute. So yeah.
That's nice.
I think those animals that are indicative of my childhood, I grew up in Texas. We had a lot of bears in Texas. We had a lot of frogs. And my mom was such a powerful influencer of my love of nature. She really encouraged me to look close and come look. So even I remember my grandpa doing the same thing to me.
I think it's important, for you to just share. It sounds like a silly question, but it's important to share because you guys are now reciprocating that same treatment you got when you were kids, and you're now trying to share that with the public in Greenville and beyond, so we all can appreciate wildlife and conservation.
We'd like to say thank you again to Jennifer and Greg for talking to us. The work they do at the Greenville Zoo is truly integral to the global conservation effort. Next time you're in South Carolina, check out the Greenville Zoo, and in the meantime, take a look at their website and consider donating to their conservation projects. Producers on this episode were Austin Parker and Taylor Parker, and the music in this episode was produced by A Picture Book. Thank you again for tuning in. Now, please like and subscribe to our page, and we'll talk to you next time.